So it's week one of Intro to Web Programming. It's January 2017. We're kind of in our second hour of class. And we've been doing a little bit of research about what PHP is all about, how it works. So we're just going to kind of comb over some of the notes. And I just want to touch on some of the important points about why are we learning PHP. It's not the only web programming language we're going to learn in our program. We're going to use PHP in this course, but we're going to use other languages in later courses. So why are we starting with PHP? So as Mateus said, this is probably the best one. PHP is a great starter language. It's easy. Okay. It's also open source. So to get started with it, someone wants to learn on their own, probably PHP is going to be the language they choose. They don't have to buy any particular software. They don't have to spend any money. In terms of the syntax of PHP, one thing nobody mentioned exactly, one of the other reasons PHP is a good language for all of you is it's very similar to languages you've already learned in your programming fundamentals. So PHP is based on C, just like Java, and which the programmer students learned last semester. It's also obviously like C#, which the web students learned last semester. So we have things like semicolons at the end of our commands. We have curly braces, etc. So if I showed you a block of PHP code right now, it wouldn't look too strange to you. It would look pretty familiar to what you're used to seeing with C# or Java already. There are some small differences, but the basic structure is the same. Okay. All of our code is going to open. Well, we did miss a couple characters here, but whenever we have PHP code on a page, it's going to start with the opening brackets here and have the word PHP and end with the closing brackets. So it's used by some of the biggest internet companies in the world. I don't need to read the names to you. And its function, and this is kind of a really important point, and we'll kind of come back to this. So it performs all of the logic and processing in a web application. So we have HTML and CSS for doing the presentation, but HTML and CSS, they're dumb. They can't really do anything. They can only display information. There's no logic, there's no ability to make decisions or do processing. So if our web applications are going to actually do something other than show static HTML content, we need some kind of server-side scripting language to drive them and do that logic. So PHP is what we're going to use in this class, and we'll learn and use some of the alternatives in later semesters. Okay. One of the other big benefits is PHP is platform independent. It will run on any operating system. Originally developed to run on Linux, but it will run on Windows or on Mac. So whatever operating system you have, you don't need to change it to use PHP. Okay. This one that Raj mentioned is also really important. And this is something that's different about PHP from building a site only with HTML and CSS. If we build web pages with HTML and CSS, we can build them on our computer. We can just open them in the browser, right? We can double click them in our file system. That page is going to open in the browser and we can see the HTML and CSS. PHP and other scripting languages, they don't work that way. The pages actually have to be served from a running live web server in order for that code to execute. So we can't just double click a file and open it in our browser. If that happens, the PHP code won't do anything. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about web servers. Now, you guys probably last semester in Scott's class, which web server did you use when you built and hosted your assignments? Where did you put them? On Azure? Okay, so PHP will run on Azure. So in this course, you can certainly put your assignments and your work up on Azure and it will run. That's fine. Some of you will also have access to the DreamHost server, which you can use. What I suggest we do in class, and I'll show you this at the end of the day today, is you can actually install your own free web server on your laptop. So when you're working in class, that's going to be much faster than copying all your files up to Azure every time we make a change. So when you're submitting work to me for marks, yes, I'm going to want it to run on Azure so I can see it in my browser and have it work. But in class, we can just use, and I'm just going to use a local web server. And there are several different local web servers we can install that are free, and there's versions for Mac, there's versions for Windows.
Are you talking about Apache or something?
Yeah, so The version for Windows, there's basically two products that will install an Apache server. One is called WAMP server. The other is called XAMPP. If you're a Mac user, there's the Mac version is called MAMP. All of these are free, so they will allow you to run an Apache server on your own laptop. So that way, all you have to do when you make changes is we can view all our files just using our local host server. And whenever we save changes to the file, we don't have to upload them to the server and refresh them. So I'm using the WAMP server on my laptop, and I'll show you where to get those tools. Doesn't matter if you don't have one installed for today, but you'll want it for next week. Okay, it's faster than copying your files to Azure every 2 minutes. Kind of takes up a lot of class time we don't need to take up. This is kind of an important point. All our PHP files have to have the extension .php. Okay? If we write a page, we call it default.html, and we put in valid PHP tags and valid PHP code and put it on a web server, that PHP code is going to get printed out to the screen, and it's not going to get executed. So all the pages, pretty much every file we create in this whole course is going to have a .php extension. We're not going to do any pages that have HTML or .html extensions. So yeah, here's the complete, well, almost the complete tag. That's what our opening tag will look like. Comments. Thank you, Makita. Same as in C# and Java, right? Multi-line comments or single-line comments in the same way. So PHP is partly case sensitive and partly not. The keywords like if or function, those things aren't case sensitive, but your variable names, your function names, your page names, those are case sensitive. So we're going to want to use a consistent case for those things and not mix them up. Okay. So for example, in PHP, just like in C# or Java, these are considered two completely separate things that are not related in any way. Okay, we've kind of mentioned a lot of these things so far, but they're all true. So yeah, here's the correct tags. Whenever we want to write PHP code, we open that here, and whenever, it could be 1 line of code, it could be 1,000 lines of code. When we're done, we close it. So the idea is our PHP pages, there's going to be a mix of HTML and PHP. We'll write a few lines of HTML, then we want to do some server-side processing. We'll have a block of PHP code and more HTML. So in many cases, our PHP and our HTML is kind of mashed all together in one file. So it's actually makes it easier for learning. It's not great for structure. Some of the other tools we use in other courses, they allow us to separate our HTML and our server-side code a little more easily. PHP kind of does a bit of a messy job of that for the most part. We're going to see this command, this echo command, that's the PHP equivalent of print. There actually is a print command as well. It's similar to echo. So this would be an example that would just display a message in PHP.
That's for output?
Yes. So when you say echo something, that value is going to show up in the user's browser. Okay. So something like this, if I go up to the top of Blackboard, right, it all shows our user, it all shows our names, right? So those names are stored in the Blackboard database. If this was a PHP page, I don't think it is, but if it was, there'd be a little PHP tag in that section that would say echo first name space last name. And that's how it shows up here.
How can we find that this is not a PHP page?
I don't know for sure. There's no extension, which is a clue. Usually we'd have PHP extensions, although there are ways around it. I don't know for absolute certain that Blackboard is not PHP, but just the way it's structured, I don't think so. So yeah, here'd be an example. Thanks for this. Who put this up here? Thanks, Gary. It's Gary, right? Right? So you can see we've got a combination. We have mostly HTML tags, but then in the middle of our HTML, we've injected one line of PHP code that will print out a hello world message to the screen. And it's important to note, we call this server-side scripting because the only thing that gets sent to the browser is that message. If we view the source of our page, users won't see our PHP code, which is good. We don't want the users to see our server-side code. That has to be hidden. So that code executes and stays on the web server. It doesn't get sent to the browser. And yeah, we can use it for creating text and images. Okay, so those are actually most of the important points we wanted to talk about. PHP is probably still the world's most popular web programming language. Eventually, it will be replaced. Its popularity has started to decrease, but we're still going to see more websites written in PHP than anything else. Eventually, it wouldn't surprise me if it's replaced by Node.js, which is JavaScript that runs on the server instead. And that's something that we'll learn either if you're a programmer student, we'll learn in advanced web programming. If you're a web student, we'll learn it in advanced server-side scripting. So I'll be teaching you guys Node.js next year. But we can do many of the same things we can do with PHP, but JavaScript in many ways is a lot more organized, which is kind of nice. Okay. So I'll leave this up. You guys did really well. You actually hit pretty much all of the important points I wanted you to find. So I'll leave this form up and you'll have access to it. I guarantee you some of the multiple choice questions from the midterm, you'll be able to find the answers in this message thread. So I'll leave it open and it'll be public. You'll be allowed to refer to it during the test. Okay. Okay. So I want to just talk a little bit about like where this all came from. Why we even bother taking this course? Really, right? You all know how to make websites now, and you know how to make them look good. You've learned some HTML, you've learned some CSS. You know how to connect to a web server and put great HTML pages and put them online. You have a live website, right? So originally, basically, all websites work the same way that, well, you already learned from Scott's class. They were nothing more than HTML and just a little tiny bit of CSS. So the internet, it was kind of like a library, right? All we could do is look up and read documents, right? We go into a library and we could ask the library, hey, do you have this book? And the library can give us one of two answers. What are the two answers? Yes or no, right? So I want to see something. Either the library says, sorry, we don't have it, or the library says, yes, here's the book, you can take the book, and basically what can you do with that book once you have it? Yeah, you can read the information in it, right? Can you add information to that book? No, can you change or delete information in the book? Yeah, only if you ripped out the pages or you scribbled on it, but not really, right? You couldn't change it for somebody else. So this is originally what the internet was like. It was just a series of HTML documents. So we'd make a request, we'd type an address, or we'd click on a link, basically saying, do you have this web page, yes or no, right? If the web page doesn't exist, what kind of response do we get back if we look up a web page address that doesn't exist? Yeah, you get a 404 error, right? Page not found. That's like you going to the library asking for a book that they don't have. Sorry, we don't have anything to give you. If that address does exist, well, what do we get back from the web server? We get some kind of HTTP response. And what do we get back from the server? We get an HTML page. It's either just plain HTML or it's HTML with some CSS. And what can we do with those pages? Well, you can read the content and that's it, right? You can't change it. You can't make comments. You can't delete it. You can't do anything else. So that's kind of where the internet started. It was just a document library, a way for universities to share documents. Here, I can put my document up so Jesse at another university can see it, and I don't have to send it to them. That was the whole idea. But there was no functionality. All we could do was ask for a document and read it. That was it. But over time, it kind of evolved into this. So originally, this was just like another publishing platform, just another place to put information that people could read. But over time, what developers realized was that we could actually use the internet and our browser as an application platform so people could do stuff, right? They could do more than just read things. They could buy things, right? They could communicate with each other. They could share things. They could create media. They could make comments and have discussion. And now this is probably our main application platform, right? We spend more time working with programs that run over HTTP than anything else, right? Whether it's on a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, a phone, whatever, you know, a smart device. Except we're still kind of stuck with this part. We still basically have a browser and all of our content still gets rendered as HTML and CSS at the end of the day. But the HTML and CSS, it can't do any processing. It can't check your credit card. It can't allow you to post comments to a video for someone else to see. So what we need is we need some kind of server-side scripting language to be the brains, to work with usually some kind of data. Maybe it'll send email, but at the end of the day, it sends HTML and CSS back to users. But the PHP or something else like PHP, that's what actually does all the processing behind all the websites we go to every day. Right? And we sort of talked about this in fundamentals if you were in my section. Let's look at a few. And I think this was, think back, this was probably lesson 1 in programming fundamentals, right? So we looked at Facebook. I think I pulled up the Georgian College page back in September, and I asked you one question. I asked you, what on this page is static HTML? And what things on this page are dynamic, are the result of some kind of server-side scripting? There's a few things on here that are static, they don't change. What things never change, no matter what Facebook page I look at? Yeah, the logo is going to be the same. Yeah, well, the whole header, is there anything on the header that's dynamic?
Like the profile name?
Yeah, so my name and avatar. What else?
The way chat looks like, not the users, like not the friends, but the way it looks like.
Yep, so the CSS, right, that's going to be the same, right? The Facebook has a general layout. It's the same. And down here, this little section, right? We can look at anybody's Facebook profile, and if you go down to the bottom, you'll see that. What's dynamic on this page? What changes depending on what profile we're looking at? Yeah, so the entire news feed with the posts. Yep, the friend list is dynamic.
Whoever is online, it comes for. Like,
yep, who's online.
And the advertisement.
Yep, the ads will be dynamic. So virtually everything on here. Checks Facebook more than once a day. It's okay, I won't hold it against you. Okay. Why do you check Facebook more than once a day? In fact, anybody want to guess? I just read recently how often the average Facebook user who has the app on their phone, how many times a day does the average Facebook user check their news feed? Just heard this last week. 20? Any other guesses? 60. Gary, you're right. The average was 14. Average user checks their news feed 14 times a day. So why, for those of you who check your feed more than once a day, why do you check it more than once a day? Right, because it's dynamic. Because every time you go here, you expect even every hour, right? Every hour, I'm expecting I'm going to see new stuff because the main content of the page is all dynamic. It's all the result of PHP showing us what's new. What about on this page? So this is usually the first look at every morning. What percentage of this page is static HTML, doesn't change. We could come back here day after day, and it's going to be exactly the same. How much of what you see won't change. Yep, okay, we can, yep, that navigation is pretty consistent. That's going to be static. Anything else? Yeah, the entire footer, probably from about here down. That stuff we can expect if we look at this page next week. It's probably going to look exactly the same as how it looks now. Anything else? Not much, right? Almost everything else other than the logo and search bar, right? The ads, login name, photos, videos, articles, all the content, which is the entire reason I come to the website to read the news. It's all dynamic. It's all being pulled, all the stories, all the videos, all the photos, it's all being pulled from the Globe and Mail's database dynamically. So I can come back here every day or even multiple times in a day, and I expect to see new stuff. So there's not somebody in here typing new HTML. They just add their news stories to the database, and they use server-side scripting to show us the latest news. Same on this site. If I scroll top to bottom, it's not too fast. Again, from here down, it's going to be static. This is just HTML and CSS here. And probably up here, it's mostly static, although they still gave us a little ad that's going to change. Everything in between, all this stuff, it's all dynamic. If I pick a different product, virtually all of that content will be different. So again, they're using server-side scripting to pull out dynamic content related to the product I've clicked on. So in the old days, all we needed was HTML and CSS. We didn't need a database. Modern web, all our content lives in a database. We're still presenting it with HTML and CSS, but we need this server-side scripting layer in the middle to go and fetch the right data, let us interact with that data, make comments, add new things. So our server-side script is the go-between between our data and our front-end application. And that's why you take this class, you take it in conjunction with your relational database class. So in that class, you're going to learn how to build, how to manipulate, how to manage the data end of things. You probably have a few different people teaching database. Who are your database instructors this term? So Jarrett for the programmers, and for web, have you had your relational database class yet? Tomorrow, who's teaching that? Forrest, okay. So he's teaching database. So everything you learn in that class is going to work with everything we do in this class. Right? Because if we're going to build our little music website, we're going to need a database to store the artists or the albums or the songs or whatever data, whatever information we want to collect and manage. It's going to go in there. So here's kind of what the big part of this course is. What I'm trying to get you to do, I mean, we all use web applications every day, whether we use them on our laptops, our mobile devices, whatever. So we're used to using them from the perspective of an end user. Now we're going to start to look at those things from the perspective of a developer. How are they built and put together? Okay. So just to give you a bit of an example. Anybody ever been here? No? Anybody know where this is? Right, probably even without going there, most of you know what it is, right? So we see this, we think of it as a famous landmark, so we see it from one perspective. Okay? However, if you're an engineer, when I show you that picture, you probably see in your mind, you see something very different. If you were an engineer, how would you see that bridge? What would you be thinking about when you look at that photo? Yeah, you're probably thinking of it kind of from this perspective, right? You can think in your eye, you can see underneath how it's put together, right? How does that massive bridge stand up over such a long span? How does it not collapse? How has it stood up for decades and decades and decades? So, you know, an engineer is going to see that bridge because they have a certain training. They understand how it was put together. So we might see this, right? There's probably some people even in this room who can look at that the way that this guy does, and they're thinking this, right? I'm not one of those people. I don't have a great understanding of mechanics and how cars work, but is there anybody in this room who knows a lot about cars and auto mechanics? Nope. Yeah, usually there is. Computers? You know, we may have watched this guy last summer, right? We see him running, but if you're somebody like a trainer, we can look at Usain Bolt running and we're thinking about how do we have to train an athlete like that to maximize how he performs, right? So what we want to start to do in class is go from the person who just looks at this every day. We want to look at it from the perspective of this guy, right? Which means the ones and zeros behind it all, right? What's all the code and script? How's it architected, and how do all the pieces fit together so that we build a solution that people can use? And also, how do the different technologies that we're learning fit together? So the idea, by the end of this semester, after taking Scott's course last semester, after taking this course and doing your relational database, you should be able to go out on your co-op and build any kind of website that you're asked to build. Because you'll know the front-end development with the HTML and CSS, you'll know how to put together and structure a database, and you'll know how to write server-side code that interacts between the database and the user front end. So those are all the pieces we need in order to be able to build a web application. Okay, so we're trying to give you all of those tools. Okay. And here's the good news for you. We take all these technologies. We may have even said this to you last term. You know, we're teaching everything you need to know, we're going to teach you, which makes you employable. But the other piece of good news is that many people see this as some kind of magic, right? Facebook looks like magic to them. Well, it's really not magic. Facebook's actually quite a simple website. Right? So the idea is once we know how to build all these websites, they all work the same way, right? Facebook is really no different under the hood than this little website we built in Intro to Web Programming. We have a database, we have some server-side scripting and some HTML and CSS, so users can add, edit, and delete data and view data. That's it. That's what Amazon is, that's what the Globe and Mail is, that's what Facebook is, that's what Reddit is, that's what every website you go to every day does. So our website is really just some kind of window into a store of data. So let's talk about Facebook. If we could look at the Facebook database, if they gave us the login and let us go in and look, what buckets or what tables do you think we'd find in there? What information does Facebook store? Okay, so user profiles would be one thing, for sure that would be in there. What else would be in there?
Email and password, like the login.
Okay, so yeah, that would probably be attached to the user profiles. What other things would be in that database?
Like pages and likes.
Yep, so a list of likes would be in there. Yep, the list of ads would be in there. What's the main thing you go in to look at? I mean, you don't look at the ads. Facebook throws the ads at you, but that's not why you're in there. Right, you want to see the posts. So that's the primary table, right? The profiles and the posts, those would be the primary areas of data that's why we go to Facebook. That's why we want to look at. So probably something like this. There, you guys mentioned most of what was on my list. Also, we'd have things like the photos, the videos, and the groups. But the Facebook database, there's not an awful lot more to it than that. There may be a few things, but those are the main pieces of information we're storing. So all the Facebook app is, the mobile app or the website, it's just a window to let you interact with that set of data, right? Every time you make a new post, you're just adding a record into the post table. Every time you check your news feed, you're running a query to look at what's new in the post table from your friends, from your friend list. That's it. What about Amazon? If we looked in their database, what lists, what collections of data would we expect to see in there? Products would be one of the main ones, right? That's why we go. Well, we go for two reasons. We don't just go to look at the products. What do we want to do with the products? Or what does Amazon want us to do? Yeah, they want us to buy the product. So when I buy a product, then where does that information go? Yep. So it's going to get stored somewhere. The two main tables are products and the orders table, right? They're showing us or the shopping cart. They're showing us products and they want us to be adding data to the shopping cart or order table. They don't just want us to look, they want us to buy and they want us to pay. So that whole site is just a window into this database. They've got products, which they categorize. We create accounts, which makes us a customer. We can add reviews, our comments on a product, which is part of what makes this site so valuable, because the products have, if you want to read reviews about a product, Amazon's probably the first place you're going to go for most types of products, because we know it's going to have the most information. It'll help us make a good decision about how we spend our money. But all this is a fairly simple database with a web application on the front that lets us interact with those things. Make orders, view products, add reviews. So I kind of like to think about this whole process. It's kind of like going to the bar with your friends, right? If you think about going out for drinks or going out for dinner with your friends, in order for everybody to get what they want, there's a whole bunch of things kind of that work together in order for that to happen. So here, we'll try to draw the analogy, right? So if you go out for drinks with your friend, how do you get your drinks? Here's the stuff you want. Here's your Jack Daniels or your Canadian Club, your Ryan Coke. I mean, do they just let you walk into the bar and go and pour your own drink? No, right? You don't have, as a customer, they'll give you a drink, but they don't give you direct access to it. You can't just walk behind the bar and grab what you want. Well, it's kind of the same thing here. When you go to Facebook, they don't say, here's our database, go ahead and get what you want out of the database, right? It's all secured. And there's a process for how you get the things you want. Okay. So in either case, as an end user, we can get what we want, but we have to go through this process. We can't just take what we want. So our database, that's kind of like the bar. This is the storage area for all the stuff we want. So on Facebook, what we want is to view the new posts, to view our friends' photos, to view videos, etc. Plus, they give us some stuff we don't want to view, like ads. So that's kind of like the bar. It's the storage container that holds everything. So if we can't go and get it, right? In the pub, you might have this guy come to your table. And he asks, or his female equivalent asks, what does everybody want, right? Same thing on the web. With a website, we tell it, how do we tell a website what it is we want? So I'm on Facebook. Let's go back. So I'm on my, when I log, well, let's see, when I log in, it takes me here. So this person. So in the bar, server comes, asks everybody, and they make the request for us, right? We don't have to go right to the bar. Our server's going to tell the bar what it is everybody wants. So there's particular ways of making instructions. In the bar, either our server has a really good memory, or if they don't, they're going to write down what everybody wants. This is the language you're going to learn in your relational database class. So what SQL is, it's a language for making instructions in any kind of database. This is the information I want. I want my news feed, or I want this friend's profile, or I want my friend's photo album. So we issue those instructions with SQL. You're going to learn that. So we order a bunch of drinks. Our server takes those instructions, goes to the bar, and the bartender hopefully gives our server a tray. Our server comes back. Let's say we've clicked on a photo album of our friend. We want to see the photos. And ultimately, everybody gets what they want. So we kind of have all these pieces that work together, right? That at the end of the day gives everybody what they want. So it's the same thing. We have all these different pieces in the pub, and we have all these different pieces in a web application. No one technology has enough functionality to do all these things. So our information we want is in a database. Users got some kind of HTTP device, and we need to work with these things in order to connect the two up and show people what they want. Today's news, something on social media, a product, anything. Okay? All going to work with these kind of tools and technologies. Most of this stuff doesn't change. The only thing really that's going to change is what programming language are we going to use to do the server-side scripting. So we'll use PHP, but we could easily use something else. Or what type of database are we going to use? But most of them are going to work in a similar way. Okay. So the idea of this course is for us to start to use PHP and understand the fundamentals, how the whole thing works. And then once we can build this stuff with PHP, it'd be really, really easy for you to go ahead and learn other languages and slightly more advanced tools in later classes. But PHP is a good, easy place for us to start. Anybody have any questions so far?
JavaScript and PHP works in the same way, or these are two different?
Well, we'll often use JavaScript along with HTML in the front end. So we'll use PHP for doing the processing on the back end. So things like checking a username and password in our database. But we can use JavaScript on the front end, for example, when somebody is signing up and we have a password and a confirm password and we want to make sure that those two values are the same before they submit, we can use JavaScript to check those kinds of things. So you're going to learn JavaScript. Did you have your client-side scripting classes already this week for the web students? Is that with Tom?
Yep.
On Mondays? Right, so the things Tom is teaching you, yeah, you can integrate those. So the stuff he's teaching you is the front-end JavaScript. And then later on, we'll do back-end JavaScript. So you're learning the language with Tom, and we'll use it instead of PHP in another course.
I think we have next semester server-side scripting.
Yeah, we'll use JavaScript. We'll use it next January in advanced server-side scripting. And for the programming students, we'll use JavaScript on the server. I'm not sure if it will either be next fall or next January as well. And it's probably going to be my class where I'll be teaching that to you. So these slides are on Blackboard, so you can review them. They're right. Those slides are right here. Okay, if I don't use PowerPoint a lot. If I do, that stuff will always be on Blackboard, at least for you to refer to. So that's just kind of the big picture. That's the really high level of where we're going in this course and kind of how this relates to and connects to the other things you're going to be learning this semester. And so the idea is kind of an integrated approach. Okay. Let's see. It's about almost 10 to, so this is probably a good place for us to take a break. Why don't we take a break? We'll come back at 4 o'clock, and then we'll try just getting started. We'll write a few very simple PHP pages, like a hello world, and maybe sending ourselves an email with PHP perhaps. We'll make it, we'll keep it pretty simple. And we'll look at how to configure things and run PHP. Okay, so we'll come back at 4 o'clock.